Anti-blunder techniques. Avoiding knight forks. We've all been there. We're winning a game, everything seems under control, and then, out of nowhere, our opponent's knight starts causing trouble. And it's especially painful when we fall for a knight fork and everything suddenly falls apart. But thanks to my very serious scientific research in the laboratory, I've come to a few discoveries that will help us avoid night forks. These rules are especially useful in time travel, when blunders tend to happen the most. The first step is understanding how to avoid night forks with check. Once you understand this, it becomes much easier to avoid forks on other pieces, or even use different pieces to restrict the knight. But for now, we'll focus especially on avoiding knight forks with check. So, rule number 1: place your king on a square of the opposite color from the knight, obviously, without making an illegal move. It's that simple. You can check it yourself. There are simply no checks. The scientific explanation is that when a knight moves, it always switches square color. Because of that, it checks on the color of squares it was on the previous move. So, if we place our king on a square of the opposite color, again, without making an illegal move, the knight cannot give a check immediately. Of course, after that we'll still need to keep moving the king to continue avoiding checks, but the first step already eliminates the fork with check. Rule number 2: an exception. If you place your king 3 squares away from the knight on a diagonal, there will also be no checks. I like to think of it this way. In that position, the knight suddenly remembers the bishop, which moves diagonally and is worth 3 points. And that scares the knight, so he doesn't dare to give a check. So remember this: 3 squares away on a diagonal. Even though you're on the same color squares, there are no checks. In fact, this position is even better for the king compared to the first tip, because it gives you 2 consecutive moves without checks. No matter where the knight moves next, you'll end up on opposite colored squares, and the knight will need another move just to even threaten a check. Rule number 3: place your king and your other piece on opposite colored squares. Since a knight can only control one color of squares per move, if your other piece is on a different color from your king, the knight can never fork you. Even if the knight gives a check, it cannot attack 2 pieces that are on opposite colored squares at the same time. Of course, this only works if you don't just hang the piece or make an illegal move. Let me show you a quick example. This actually happened to me in a real game during a tournament. I was playing white. I was in time trouble and I reached the following position. My king was placed according to rule number 2 that I just explained, but it was forced out of that square by my opponent's move, rook g2 check. And here came the critical moment. Okay, the best move, objectively, was to block the check with bishop f2, but once you touch the king has to move. At that point, the king only had 3 legal moves: king f1, king e1, or king d1, and only one of them is not a blunder. At that moment, I was thinking about defending my c2 pawn, so I played the wrong move, king d1, allowing the cursed knight fork, and eventually losing the game. If the king goes to f1, the fork happens as well. The right move, of course, is king e1. Once you understand the previous rules, this move becomes obvious. King e1 places the king on a square of the opposite color from the knight, and that completely avoids any checks. And now, my final reflection. Thinking about it, it's interesting that we often compare the knight to the bishop. When you look at it more closely, you realize they share an important quality. Unlike the other major pieces, both of them can only control one color of squares. With the knight, of course, that color change every move. Well, that's all for today. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.